everyone, and welcome back to the Brainy Boomer Lecture Series. We're so very happy that you've all joined us today. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the McGill University Research Center for Studies in Aging is located and our work is done on unceded Indigenous lands. The Kanien'kehá:ka Nation is recognized as the custodians in the lands and waters on which we gather today. Tiohtià:ke, commonly known as Montreal, is historically known as a gathering place for many Indigenous peoples. Today, it is home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples. We respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples that we serve within the Montreal community. In 2007, the McGill University Research Center for Studies in Aging, or the MCSH Education Committee, started the Brainy Boomer Lecture Series in order to suggest practical steps to both improve and maintain brain health, as well as to promote healthy lifestyle choices amongst the most populous generation in history. The MCSH Education Committee, which was founded in 1996, has three main objectives: identifying education needs of healthcare providers, seniors, caregivers, and the public, and to develop responses to meet some of their needs; to enhance the positive image of the aging process by addressing stereotypes and myths about aging; and finally, the dissemination of research on aging. Our speaker today is Claire Webster, and she is a certified dementia care consultant, certified professional consultant on aging, as well as a conference speaker and educator in the field of caring for individuals with dementia. She is founder and president of Caregiver Crosswalk, a consulting firm that provides education and support services to help individuals navigate the journey of Alzheimer's disease and/or dementia-related illnesses. Claire works in collaboration with McGill University's Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences and the Division of Geriatric Medicine. She is the founder and ambassador of the McGill Dementia Education Program and McGill Cares, a weekly webcast series designed to support family care partners. Claire is one of the McGill senior co-editors of the World Alzheimer Report 2021, a journey through the diagnosis of dementia, which launched September 21st, 2021 by ADI, Alzheimer's Disease International. And she is also the senior co-editor for the upcoming World Alzheimer Report 2022, the interrelated topic, Post-Diagnosis Support Principles of Care. Before continuing, we would like to remind you to please mute your microphone on Zoom, and that if you have any questions, you could write them down in the chat box, or you could wait until the end to ask them yourself. So now I'd like to pass off to Claire to start her presentation.
Oh, thank you for that introduction, Caitlin, and really looking forward to giving this talk. Because honestly, that whole bio description you provided of me, it's the topic of anger that led me to do the work that I'm doing today. And I really like to say, you know, I'm not what happened to me, but I am what I choose to become. And all the work that I'm doing today in the field of dementia care education, I was propelled to do this because of anger. And, you know, I hear a lot of talks about managing caregiver stress, but I feel like the topic of anger is something that is a bit of taboo. People don't always want to admit it. So the way that I like to work and speak is I'm a kind of like a storyteller. So I'm going to share my own journey with all of you, and then some of the lessons that I've learned and how I was able to navigate this anger. And so like Caitlin mentioned, so I work with a lot of families. I mean, I became a dementia care consultant back in 2016. I work with hundreds and hundreds of families. But I guess the work that I'm most proud of is the work that I'm doing with the Faculty of Medicine, and have the great opportunity to work with Dr. Rosa Neto and Dr. Serge Gauthier and Dr. José Morin, and leading the McGill Dementia Education Program. And so following my talk today, I would like to let you all know that there's so many resources that are available for you. Most importantly, a dementia companion guide that is now translated, available to download for free, available in English, French, and Spanish. We are in the process of continuing to translate it in multiple languages. And we have more than 70 webcasts on a wide variety of topics. Dr. Rosa Neto and Dr. Serge Gauthier have been my guests. So it's all there available for you for free. Okay, so please go and visit our site. So if there are also people that are interested in reading the World Report on the diagnosis of dementia, You know, again, that's available through the McGill site. I think it's very interesting reading. And to give you the full story of what happened to me, I actually contributed a chapter in the World Report of chapter 16, because in 45 minutes today, I won't be able to give you my full story. So to begin with, like what is the root of anger? And when we were preparing the World Report, we did a survey of caregivers around the world, and what was the biggest issue that they encountered upon diagnosis. And the truth is that was really the lack of information. So today, when I'm speaking about when I'm speaking about anger, or I'm speaking about lack of information, this doesn't necessarily only have to apply to dementia. You know, you could be caring for somebody who has cancer or heart disease or diabetes or mental health issues. And if you are in a situation where you don't have the information that you need, you don't have the resources that you need, that to begin with can cause a lot of anger, okay? Because we're in a state of, we're not confident, where we feel very, very insecure in terms of what we're doing. So, you know, how does anger begin? Honestly, it's oftentimes when we're put into a situation where it's out of our control. Okay, so my own personal journey began actually in September of 2006, when my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Prior to doing the work that I'm doing, I had absolutely no idea what dementia was at all. All right. So this all the work that I'm doing is really stems from my own hands-on experience that I had caring for my mother, the lack of support that I experienced from the healthcare system, okay, and the lack of support, just my whole going into this with no information. So when my mother was diagnosed by the doctor, you know, again, I wasn't prepared for the doctor's appointment. I did not know what questions to ask. I didn't understand the signs and symptoms. You know, after performing the initial diagnosis using the mini mental test, and he pronounced that my mother had Alzheimer's disease and without warning removed her license, the only words that we were given were good luck. Okay, so good luck, Mrs. Webster. That was the prescription we were giving. And if we talk about anger, my mother was at the time in complete denial that anything was wrong with her. Like many people, not willing to go to the doctor. So it took all my strength, all my effort to get her there, right? So imagine the anger that she felt upon having her license removed, about being told these words of Alzheimer's, which was a very big taboo for her, okay? And imagine the anger that I felt leaving the doctor's office without absolutely any idea of what to do next, okay? So it's that whole like, now what? Like, what do we do? So what normally happens with either, it could be dementia, again, it could be other illnesses, when you receive this news, this unbelievable news that you are getting, it's as if your life is being now completely turned upside down. You're getting this news that you know is going to interrupt the life that you knew. So the seeds of anger often begin oftentimes at the moment of diagnosis, when you're getting that news that you know is going to interrupt your life forever. So over the course of many years, I've worked with hundreds again of caregivers, whether it be one-on-one or through education sessions like this. And these are the words that they tell me, okay, and many that I'm felt, right? So why am I so angry? So first of all, it's how could this have happened to my mother, father, husband, wife? Like, how could this have happened, right? And then the next question is, how could this have happened to me? Right? Like me, this is happening to me. I'm not prepared for this journey, right? Our plans for the future are interrupted. We had planned to travel. My husband just retired, you know, or in my case, I was a sandwich generation caregiver with one children. How was I going to balance taking care of my children and taking care of my parent, right? How will I cope with this? I don't have the patience necessary to be a caregiver. How will I cope? Right? These are the words I hear oftentimes. I often hear the words, I don't understand why they're acting this way. I'm so frustrated. They ask me the same question multiple times a day. They're always repeating themselves. Like, I'm so frustrated, right? The other issue that causes a lot of anger is, how will I afford care? Because unfortunately, dementia puts a lot of financial pressure on families, right? And if I talk to caregivers, what causes the highest level of stress? Most of the time, it's finances. How will we pay for care? how, or the conflicts that arise among family members on the type of care that the family that they want, that the person should receive, right? I don't want to have home care support. I don't want to transition to a residence. So there's a lot of conflict and anger happening within the family, right? And again, back to the caregiver, as this disease progresses, it becomes much harder on the caregiver than it is on the person who has the disease. So it's constantly, what about my life? I want to travel. I want to see my friends, but I feel too guilty about leaving my loved one. Okay. And then I often hear also, I can't stand my husband. I can't stand my wife. I hate my mother. I hate my father. I'm now in a position where I have to care for them, right? That happens to families where there's been discord over the years, and all of a sudden they find themselves in a situation where I'm expected to spend the next 10 years caring for this person that I can't stand, right? And these are things that people feel so ashamed to say. But I put this out there because what's important for you to realize is that you're not alone, okay? And what I needed to do on my journey to get where I needed to be in healing, I had to let go of all of the things that I didn't want to say, right? You have to allow your vulnerability to be there. So this is an illness that has a significant ripple effect. It doesn't only have a ripple effect on the person that is diagnosed, it has a ripple effect on the caregiver. So let's say in my case, I had 3 young children. It had an impact on my 3 children. It had an impact on my husband. I had a totally different career back then, impact on my career, has an impact oftentimes for couples on their social life. They're nervous about getting together with their friends because they don't want anybody to know that the husband or the wife has dementia. They're embarrassed, right? Has an impact on finances, has an impact on the healthcare system. So all of those facets put together cause stress. And how does the stress come out? Of course, it's going to come out in anger. So a bit of my own story and what led me to do the work that I'm doing today. So, one thing that this illness causes is a lot of anticipatory mourning. So the picture with my mother at my wedding was, it was a few years before her diagnosis. Although I had started seeing, she was diagnosed at the age of 74, no memory issues, but significant changes in personality. I would never imagine. My mother was a very athletic, beautiful woman. But along the journey, you could see the changes. You see not only the cognitive impact that this illness has, but you witness on a constant basis the physical changes that happen, right? And at the time when I was a caregiver, this was my life. I had just given birth to my 3rd child after having a very difficult pregnancy. A month after the birth of my child, my father was hospitalized for congestive heart failure. I have no recollection of my younger daughter, Sienna's first few months of life because I was constantly at the hospital trying to advocate for my father while he was in the hospital and nobody was taking the proper care of him, which is making me even more angry, right? Trying to balance a young family, right? My father passes away then in January of 2005. And the next thing you know, my mother starts all these incredible signs and symptoms, and I had no idea what was going on with her, right? And so when she was diagnosed in 2006, once again, I had other things going on in my life. I mean, I had my mother's Alzheimer's, but most people, we all have other things, right? So I say in life, you have to constantly expect the unexpected, like what happened to Dr. Rosanetta with his arm. Things happen, and things were always happening, right? So there was my mother, and I was trying to manage her care without the proper tools. I cannot emphasize that enough. She was diagnosed in 2006. From 2006 to 2011, I had no idea what I was doing. I was just managing, okay? Then my son goes to a summer camp, has a terrible accident at a summer camp, has a broken femur, has to be hospitalized for a few weeks, and then he's in a wheelchair. And that same year that happened to him, then my mother ended up having hip replacement surgery that went terribly wrong. Then not long after that, my son had another accident. So you're constantly like, you're like a soldier at war where you're trying to dodge bullets all the time, right? And that was making me very angry. And my mother, because once she was diagnosed in September of 2006, it was clear that she wasn't able to live alone anymore. I had to move her. I did not know at all what was the difference between public residences, private residences, and healthcare system. My mother at this point was in her late 70s, and all of a sudden she needs emergency hip replacement surgery that went terribly wrong. Okay. And unfortunately, there was a lack of training at the hospital. They weren't informing me, or we didn't know the impact that anesthesia would have on a person with dementia, which makes them really act out. Following her surgery, she suffered a heart attack post-surgery, a broken femur post-surgery. She was transferred to a rehabilitation center. And I'm caring for my 3 kids, dealing with what was going on in my husband's life, not getting any type of compassion, support. Nobody ever asked me, "How are you, Mrs. Webster?" And that, when people say you're angry, this was making me very angry. Okay. But what also was frustrating me, which I know a lot of people go through, is this entire healthcare system, right? How do we navigate it? What are we supposed to do? And, as compared to other illnesses, as soon as somebody receives a diagnosis of dementia, there's so many pieces of this puzzle that you have to put in place immediately that nobody tells you about, right? It's like, okay, you get the diagnosis, then you need to make sure that you contact your local CLSC. What type of support? You've got to meet a social worker. Have you thought about financial planning? Do you have the mandate? And there's nobody there guiding us and explaining all of this to us, right? So it's causing us stress, it's causing us confusion. I'm sure many of you know who've been in touch with the CLSC, they're overburdened. It takes months and months to get an appointment, right? So you're not alone in this. I just wanted you to say that if you're feeling confused, you're not alone, okay? It's really everybody's confused, right? But we're all human. So if you have to add in the disease itself, then other maybe pre-existing conditions that other family members face, or pre-existing responsibilities that other families face, right? And then we are supposed to manage it all, right? So how could you not feel angry? The other reality in all of this as well is like I said from the very beginning, it's the anticipatory grieving and coping with loss. So my mother passed away on May 6, 2016. I was there with her for the final end of the illness. I was also there with my father at the end. And unfortunately, there's no support for people also once you go through you've witnessed a traumatic event, which is the loss of your parents. There's nobody there. And what happens is that all of a sudden, this person that you've been grieving for is gone. And friends in all good intention may come over and say, "You're better off now. It's a big weight off your shoulders." But it's not, right? And there's no support. So the anger that I was feeling throughout the journey with my mother, even though she passed away, it was still there, okay? So what happens is, to most people, like it happened to me, when I first got the diagnosis, when I was first placed into this role of caregiver, which many people you don't recognize, you don't self-identify as a caregiver. You say, "No, I'm the husband, I'm the wife, I'm the daughter, I'm the son." Well, you are a caregiver, right? But we try so hard to try to do everything ourselves, right? Like the moment that my mom was diagnosed, I was thrown into what I call the cyclone of caregiving. You're thrown into this cyclone. And anytime somebody tried to offer help, my response to them was, "Many thanks, but I'm not there yet. I'm all good." If anybody, friends of mine said, "Claire, can I pick up your kids from school?" The answer would be, "No, I'm all good, thank you." "Claire, let us help. Maybe we can drive some." "No, I'm all good." And I worked really, really, really hard to keep this face, this smiling face to the outside world that everything was okay. When the truth was, internally, I was not okay. So when we talk about anger, or we talk about, burnout, because I did suffer a very severe burnout in July of 2011. What are some of the warning signs? Okay. And because oftentimes when I talk about my journey of really having like a real burnout, what does it look like? First of all, it doesn't happen overnight. Okay. I'll tell you that much. It's something that builds and builds and builds. And it's an accumulation of factors. In my case, it had been an accumulation of, having a difficult childbirth, not having enough time to cope with my father's death, and then all of a sudden getting the diagnosis of my mother, and then having the responsibility of these 3 kids, right? And then managing her case and over again. But what were the signs that that the warning signs that something isn't right? Well, in my case, it was anger. So for example, I would pick up my kids from school at 4 o'clock. They were very small at the time and they like, Mommy, we have homework. And I just had no patience. I had a son who was 9. Well, at the time, so I would say my son was 9, my daughter was 2, and my other one was 4. But if I add a few years when they were in school, I had no patience for homework. I was yelling at them, please, I have my son, please go and do the homework with them. If they were running around the house too loud, I was always like losing my temper at my husband. But it was how fast I was losing my temper. That's what was happening. It's how fast I can go from 0 to 100. It's how frequent I was getting angry, okay? Other people, you may feel, lack of sleep. You really don't sleep well. You want to stay in bed. You're feeling extremely depressed, okay? Unexplained weight problems or gaining weight. People do use different, which I'll talk about afterwards, different coping mechanisms to deal with your anger, right? But in my case, I started to have suicidal thoughts. Like it became too much. And all I could think about was maybe be better off if I wasn't there anymore. Okay. It was too much. And again, it wasn't just the role as a caregiver. I want to be clear. It wasn't just because I was a caregiver. There were multiple other factors going on in my life that were contributing to this, right? But because I did not have the tools or education to be able to manage the care of my mother, I did not have the tools to be able to manage the other aspects of going on in my life. This is what led me here, okay? And as I mentioned earlier, I was resistant to reach out for support. So today I advocate about the importance, if you're feeling all of this, do not wait until you reach a crisis point. So COVID had a very big impact on coping mechanisms because it really isolated a lot of us. But what are some of the most common coping mechanisms that people use to manage anger or stress? So because we go through this whole system of, first of all, we're in denial, like it's not as bad, it's really not that bad, right? Then guilt always comes up that, oh no, only I can take care of my mother, my father, my husband, my wife. I can't go for dinner. I can't see my friends. Everything is, I can't do because of guilt, right? And then the grief, and then the isolation we feel, and then the anger. So when we get to the anger, what do people do to manage the anger? Well, in my case, it was wine. I loved wine. As soon as I'd pick up the kids from school, I'd come home, open up the bottle of wine, right? But it wasn't 1 or 2 glasses. The 1 or 2 glasses became 4, right? Sometimes it became a bottle and a half. And then what would happen the next day, I'd wake up and I'd feel hungover and I'd feel shame. But then how would I manage that? I'd start the entire cycle. Use food, right? Some people will develop a food addiction. Some people will mix. They'll have wine and they'll have Ativan, or they'll do wine and online shopping. There could be more, but I tell you, everybody has something, right? And I feel it's important that people know you're not alone, because you cannot be feeling this way, this anger or this stress, and not use something. And if you are one of those people, that's amazing. But I have to say, the majority of caregivers that I work with, everybody has a coping mechanism. What's important to know, though, is that these coping mechanisms can easily become addictions. When my mother died in 2016, the wine addiction did not go away, okay? Or the way I was presenting myself, or my stress that I was feeling, because for almost 12 years, I had trained myself to respond a certain way, to adopt certain habits, right? And so don't think that, oh, when the person passes away or when this happens, I'll be better, I won't drink anymore, I won't eat anymore, I won't smoke anymore. It doesn't work that way. So I've had to unlearn the last few years all of those habits, all right? So please be aware of that. So how did I go from all of this to doing the work that I'm doing today? Okay, what happened? So in July of 2011 was when I had that epic moment of complete, I was, very, very close to suicidal, okay? And the first thing that came into my head was actually my 3 children. And what I failed to realize is between 2006 and 2011 was that my children were watching me. And I see this a lot with the sandwich generation caregivers. I was so frustrated and I was so caught up in my own anger that I didn't realize that my kids were watching me. And so when that day where I was sitting in the driveway in the car having a complete terrible moment, and I called my husband, who was, definitely we had to do a lot of intervention to get me the help and support that I needed. Um, was it was the thought of real or coming to the realization that my children had already witnessed so much. You know, while I was watching my mother unravel, the kids were watching their mother unravel. Okay, and so I had to really get the help. And it took time. It really took time. And when I did get the help, I was actually diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. Not like the veterans, but there's a lot of caregivers go through it. But when I knew I was in real trouble, besides all of those signs and symptoms, I had uncontrollable shaking all the time, which was also, I was trembling all the time and I needed help. Okay. So if you are going through that, it's really time to raise the white flag and don't wait for a crisis to have a heart attack or something to end up in the hospital. It's very important. Okay. Now I want to talk to you about how could we try to make the journey a little bit more. It's not going to be smooth, but just try to navigate this journey. First of all, what's really important is to know that all of us, what do we want for our loved ones, okay? Or what do we want for the neighbor that we're caring for, or the aunt that we're caring for? We want them on this journey, for whatever it's worth, to be happy, right? To be in a place that is going to take good care of them. We want them to be safe and we want them to be clean. So when I was advocating for my mother on the final years, especially of her journey, whether she was in a private residence or the public system, those were my guiding principles. That's what I wanted to accomplish and ensure for her. Okay. But how do we get there? First of all, no matter what diagnosis you receive for any condition, right? Because many of us could have other conditions besides dementia. You can have dementia and diabetes and heart issues and high blood pressure and cholesterol, right? It's important to understand your illness. Okay. It's the number one priority. Understand the illness, understand how it's going to progress. Okay. Understand all the symptoms and behaviors that are going to come up so that you're not caught off guard and you're not surprised and you're not left wondering, is this normal? So education is so important, right? But not only education about the illness, but education about the resources that are out there to support you from the moment that you receive the diagnosis. Don't wait halfway through until you feel like you're on the verge of a burnout to call those resources. You need to access them as soon as possible. So educate yourself. Number two, this just doesn't work. Okay, many thanks, but I'm just not there yet. The people that want to help you, or if you're now reached the point where the doctor's recommending that you get some home care support, or maybe it's time to transition your loved one, don't put it off. Okay, it's important that you seek the support as soon as possible, because what happens with dementia, it causes what I like to refer to as the anchoring effect. And the anchoring effect means that the person that you are caring for, of course, they're only going to want you to look after them, right? For all those people who are saying, oh, well, if I try to get outside support, my mother, father, husband, wife won't let anybody in the house. Of course they won't, because they want you. They're so used to having you take care of them, right? So it's important that you identify as much as possible a third person who's maybe not a family member to take care, so that you have some respite for yourself, so that you have the time to go out and have a coffee with a friend, or when time comes to have a weekend with your grandkids, right? But that's really important. The second thing is that I did not know, which I really recommend, is that every time you go and have that appointment with the doctor, that's a precious appointment. You need to arrive prepared, especially if it's the first appointment or a 6-month appointment. I used to think, or I remember when I was going for the appointment with my mother, the doctor is God, right? He's going to tell me everything that I need to know. He's going to have all the time in the world to sit with us for an hour and talk to us. It doesn't work that way, okay? So follow-up appointments normally last about 10, 15 minutes if you're lucky. Arrive prepared, right? Arrive with the questions, arrive with your concerns, be proactive, right? The doctor can't read your mind. He's got hundreds and hundreds of patients that he's got to care for, right? So arrive prepared. If you have concerns, ask what are the next steps. It's also, one of the things that causes a lot of stress on family members is the whole aspect of having to remove the person's driver's license or no longer managing the finances. Let the doctor tell your loved one when it's time. Work with the doctor. Let the doctor say, it's time to give up the license. It's time for you to have somebody else manage your finances. It shouldn't be the family member who's going to take that all away, okay? So these are things that cause stress and cause anger, and let the doctor do it. Let him be there with you, okay? And but be prepared. This is your time with them, okay? But the mistake a lot of people make is you're going to this doctor's appointment that you've been waiting for, and you're not prepared. And the next thing you know, you're out of the office and you're like, I didn't even have a chance to ask any questions. Okay, so be prepared. The other topic that is very hard for people to deal with, but it's so important, it's got a plan for the future, all right? You need to sit down and discuss the finances. Where are the finances located in the event that we should all be doing this actually in our 40s and 50s. In the event that I'm not able to make the decisions for myself, who's going to make those decisions for me? One of the biggest sources of anger and stress among families is the fact that for a second, right? Oh, am I back? I'm back.
Yeah, you're
Okay,
good.
sorry, I froze for a second there. Sorry. Okay, I'm good. Okay, so one of the biggest, gonna go back to my slide here. One of the biggest sources of stress among families is really not having a plan. Who's going to be designated as the mandate, the power of attorney, right? I mean, it's all of those, like the legal issues, the funeral arrangements, and I had no conversation with my mother. I didn't know any of her wishes and any of that. And then when you're put into the situation where you have to make those decisions, it causes so much stress, right? Especially when you're the notarized power of attorney and you have to make the decisions also at the end to resuscitate, to not resuscitate. So it's better to have these conversations, earlier than later, okay? And what COVID has taught us is that in life, there's a plan A, but you must have a plan B, okay? So what we know for sure is the majority of people would really like to stay at home for as long as possible, okay? We know that, right? But sometimes things happen where it won't be possible. So for example, if it's a couple who are living together and they're in their late 70s or 80s, and the primary care partner gets sick or gets COVID or passes away before the person with dementia does, what's next, right? Most of the time, the grown-up kids, they can't have mom or dad move in with them. They have their lives, right? I've worked with families where, the kids have said to me, oh, my mother or father have threatened to take me out of their will if I place them in a home. That's not fair, okay? So as a family, you have to have a plan A and a plan B. But again, because it takes all of these things take time, you need to do your research. You need to get in touch if you're going to be dependent on the public healthcare system. You must get in touch with a social worker as soon as possible so that they can open a file that they can assess. Right now in the public healthcare system, the waiting list is 2 to 3 years, okay? The private system is different. The private system, there is really not much of a waiting list, right? But it's because it's also very expensive. But I can't emphasize enough the plan A and the plan B, because this topic about all the planning causes so much anger and discussions among family, okay? So just so that you understand also the impact that COVID had on people caused so much isolation. So when we talk about anger, the fact that for those of you that maybe used to accompany your loved one to Coming Center or AGI or Alzheimer's Society for day programs. That stopped. Even though they're back up and running in many places, a lot of people developed what I call COVID phobia. They're afraid now to go back, even though it's okay, they're afraid, right? So here you had the caregiver, no respite. They may have been used to getting home care support, but then they were afraid to have somebody come back into the home for fear of getting COVID. So it caused isolation. The other reality was, because of this situation, for those of you who perhaps were dependent on nurses or social workers or other professional care to come in and do certain tasks in caring for your loved one, all of a sudden those responsibilities fell on your shoulders, right? The whole act of perhaps showering your loved one, changing them, feeding them, dressing them, right? And I speak to family members and they're like, I wasn't trained for this. I don't know how to put in even a catheter. I don't know how to take blood. I don't know how, if my husband or wife doesn't want to take a shower, I don't know how to manage this, right? So there was a lot of families going through this during COVID, which caused a lot of, again, anger and stress. So just a few tips also, I mean, I think to try to diffuse some situations, what's really important is it's important to pick your battles, right? So, for those of you that are still hesitant to go out there and go back to like your day-to-day life, even healthy couples where you're living all day long with your husband, your wife, your partner, you can get on each other's nerves. It's very easy when you're spending too much time together, especially today, a lot of people are working from home. You can really get on each other's nerves. So it's about picking your battles. So if your loved one, if what they are doing is not harming them, okay, or not harming the others, let it go. I hear too many, spouses or caregivers saying, oh my God, and they walk around the apartment all day, they're always pacing, or they're always emptying the closet, or they're changing their clothes 5 times a day, or, if what they are doing isn't harming them, let them be, right? You may find it's odd, but for them, it's stimulating, okay? They are finding ways to keep themselves stimulated. So let it go, all right? And when something isn't going right, when they wake up and they are being aggressive, you need to be a detective and not a judge. There's for sure something in their environment that could be causing them to be upset. It could be that the TV is too loud, the radio is too loud, too many people are talking to them, the dog's barking, they're gotten to the point where they can no longer communicate properly. So they may be feeling pain in their stomach, or they may have something going on physically that they just can't express, right? It may be your attitude, your behavior, your energy that's going on, right? So it's really about trying to, this is a whole seminar on itself, but it's really about trying to determine what could it be going on in their environment that could be causing them to that. The other part that causes a lot of anger and fighting among couples is like always correcting them, just join their journey. If they're telling a story, and even if what the story they're telling doesn't make sense, just go along with it. If you keep correcting them, you're going to end up getting into very confrontational with them, right? Just let them talk, let them be, but if you keep correcting them, you are going to be aggravating an argument, okay? They believe very much in their head that the story that they're telling is true. So just go along with it. Again, unless they're saying something that is harmful to you, to them, like really harmful, but you have to use your judgment and just let it go. And I also like to use the term, what we call the compassionate lie. If the information that you're going to tell them is going to have a catastrophic reaction, okay, on them, think before you speak, okay? So for example, I'll give you an example. I do a lot of Zoom consults. And, sometimes I'm talking to the caregiver and their loved one walks into the room. Well, if the husband or the wife is going to tell their loved one that they're speaking to a dementia consultant because they don't know how to take care of them, I mean, what is that going to serve, right? You could tell, why not say, oh, I'm speaking to a financial advisor, or I'm just speaking to a friend, or I'm learning a new thing. But if the information you're going to tell them is going to hurt them, think before you speak, okay? But most importantly, it's about you. How do you feel, right? So if you're, again, one of the people that says, many thanks, I'm not there, I don't need help, only I'm going to do it. But at the end of every day you wake up and you feel that the world is a weight on your shoulders and you're tired all the time and you're angry all the time, how do you think the energy is going to be towards your loved one? So most importantly, the person who's the most important on the journey is you. It's the caregiver. There is no more important person on this journey. what did I have to do to heal? And a big part of my healing was I had to really look at my life. So this was when was recovering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Was I had to look at my life and say, okay, what are the projects, what are the people that are currently involved in my life that I could let go of? What could I just finally say no to? So for example, many of you may be, I don't know, on a committee, you may volunteer for somebody, you may be part of, I don't know, a book club that every time you get this notice to go to this book club, you say, oh, I don't feel like it, right? I had to really make a decision about only because I knew I was only halfway through the journey with my mother and it was going to be an even more difficult journey the next 5 years. I had to save my energy. So I really had to let go of the people and commitments that were not serving me. And that's very difficult, especially when it comes to people. So especially when there's family members too that are involved, right? Where you may be getting together for dinners with family members and you're going, I just can't do it. So I had to set boundaries. I would say, you know what, I'll have lunch with this person because lunch is short. It's an hour and 15 minutes. I'm not doing dinner. Dinner, it's 3-4 hours. Alcohol is often involved. And when people drink too much, they say things they don't mean. I am not having dinners. Or to this day, even when I get invitations from people to have a coffee with me or to have dinner with me or lunch, I say to myself, do I really want to give up my time? What is it gonna add to me? Okay. For business reasons, sometimes I must do some things, but is it really gonna add value to my life, right? Because we're always thinking, oh, I feel bad. I feel bad about saying no. But the thing is, if you can't say no and you can't advocate for yourself, how are you gonna take care of yourself, right? So you have to stop apologizing. You have to really try to learn to protect your own energy, right? And or in the days when my kids were younger, I felt like every time I had to say no, I'd have to give this long explanation why. I'm sorry I can't come to your lunch because I have to do this. I just say to everybody, thank you so much for thinking of me. I'm not available, all right? But in order to take the best quality of care of the person that you are looking after, you have to take care of yourself, okay? And don't wait until you get to a crisis like I did, okay? In order to, turn things around, right? So I learned, I finally had the tools. And for me, the most important tool that I learned on the journey, which helped me get to where I am today, is I learned to be vulnerable. I stopped saying, no, I'm okay. I finally accepted to get the help that I needed. I finally accepted to get help from people that were offering it. Where can I get the support, right? And that's how I was able to heal, was finally saying yes to support. So at the end of the day, what's most important is you really need to give yourself permission to have a life. I hear too many caregivers who are saying, oh, I can't travel, I can't do this, I can't do that because my husband can't do it anymore, my wife can't do it, how could I do it? I mean, I even gave up trips with my family because I was so worried about leaving my mother, even though I knew that she was in a place where they were taking good care of her, but it was feeling guilty. Guilt serves no purpose on this journey, okay? It really doesn't. So as a reminder, as my last slide, so then I can take some questions, we really put a lot of time. Dr. Serge Gauthier was the one leading this Dementia Companion Guide. It was a collaboration between the Division of Geriatric Medicine, the McGill Center for Research Studies in Aging, the McGill School of Physical and Occupational Therapy, School of Social Work, Alzheimer's Society. A lot of people contributed to this guide, and it is there and it's available for you for free. You can get a printed copy on Amazon if you want for $20, and all the proceeds go to our program. And we also have a lot of webcasts for you to view. So the education information does not just end here. So thank you.